Welcome back, friend. Tonight we journey to ancient Greece, where gods walked among mortals and light itself was a living force. Settle in. This is the tale of Apollo, the golden god of light and music, whose story begins not in glory but in desperate flight. Before Apollo drew his first breath, his mother Leto wandered the earth, hunted by a goddess's jealous rage. Picture her now. Hera, queen of the gods, had forbidden any land from giving Leto shelter. Every shore turned her away, every mountain refused her rest. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Leto walked on bleeding feet, her divine children stirring within her, waiting to be born. Then she found Delos, a small island drifting unanchored in the Aegean Sea. Because it floated, Hera's curse could not touch it. The island welcomed the weary goddess. Springs bubbled up to quench her thirst, soft grasses rose to cushion her. Delos chose compassion. For 9 days and nights, Leto labored beneath the sacred palm. All the goddesses came to help her, except jealous Hera, who kept Eileithyia away. Finally, Iris the rainbow messenger flew to fetch the birth goddess. The moment she arrived, Artemis came into the world, silver, bright and wild. Though merely moments old, Artemis turned to help her mother deliver her twin. Even in her first hour, she was already the protector. Then Apollo emerged into the world, and every shadow on the island fled. Golden light poured from the newborn god like the sun itself. The floating island anchored itself forever in that moment, held in place by the weight of divinity borne upon its shores. Zeus himself sent gifts from Olympus, a silver bow for Artemis, a golden one for Apollo, and a chariot of swans to carry the young god. Apollo took his bow in hand, and it sang. He plucked its string, and the first note of divine music echoed across all of Greece. But word reached Delos of a darkness in the world. At Delphi, an ancient serpent called Python terrorized all who came seeking wisdom. Python had guarded the oracle since before the Olympians rose to power. Now it demanded human sacrifice, corrupting the sacred site with fear. Young Apollo listened to the refugees' tales. His golden eyes hardened with purpose. Light, he understood, was meant to banish darkness. He rose, a god of only days old but burning with divine purpose. The hunt for Python would be Apollo's first great quest. Rest now in that light. To understand Apollo, we must first know his father. Zeus, king of all gods, who rules from thunder, wrapped Olympus with absolute power. Zeus had loved many, but Leto held a special place. She was gentle where others were fierce, patient where others demanded. He chose her. From that union came twins destined to illuminate both day and night. Apollo would carry the sun's fire, Artemis the moon's silver mystery. Zeus gave Apollo dominion over many things: light and truth, music and poetry, healing and plague, prophecy and the archer's art. Such power in one god might seem unbalanced. But Apollo's domains all shared one truth: they brought clarity where there was confusion. Music orders chaos into harmony. Prophecy illuminates the unknown. Healing restores what is broken. Light banishes shadow. This was Apollo's purpose. Yet with such gifts came great responsibility. Zeus watched his golden son carefully, knowing power untested becomes power corrupted. The young god needed a trial, a test worthy of his divine heritage. And in the darkness of Delphi, such a test waited with coiled patience. Now let us speak of Python, that ancient terror. Born from the mud left by Deucalion's great flood, it was older than the Olympian gods themselves. Python made its home beneath Mount Parnassus, where vapors rose from cracks in the earth and visions came to those who breathed them. For centuries, Python guarded the oracle there. Mortals came seeking wisdom, and the serpent decided who lived to receive it and who became its prey. The serpent grew cruel with time. What began as guardianship became tyranny. Python demanded blood offerings, reveling in the fear it inspired. Villages emptied around Delphi. Those who once sought prophecy now fled from the mountain, carrying tales of the monster to distant shores. Python's scales were harder than bronze, its venom could melt stone. No mortal weapon had ever pierced its hide. Heroes had tried and failed. But Python feared one thing. A prophecy spoken long ago warned that a child of Zeus would one day end its ancient reign. This was why Python had hunted Leto across the world. It hoped to destroy Apollo before he could be born. But Delos had hidden them both. Now the child was born, growing stronger each day on sacred Delos. Python waited in its cave, knowing the confrontation was inevitable. Let us return to gentler things. Leto, the Titaness, whose love for her children defined everything she endured. She deserves to be remembered. Before Zeus, Leto was a goddess of modesty and motherhood. She sought no thrones, desired no worship. She wanted only to love and be loved. Hera's jealousy had driven her across every land. Mountains turned her away. Rivers refused her water. Cities barred their gates against her. 9 months of wandering, carrying divine twins who grew stronger even as she grew weaker. Her determination never wavered, not once. When Delos finally welcomed her, Leto wept. Not from sorrow, but from gratitude. She blessed the island with eternal springs and sacred ground. After the twins' birth, Leto remained on Delos, recovering her strength. She taught her children what kindness meant, what compassion required. Apollo would carry her lessons always. Even in his fiercest moments, some part of him remembered his mother's gentle voice speaking of mercy. Now we must speak of Artemis, Apollo's twin, born moments before him beneath that sacred palm. She was wild from her first breath. Where Apollo was measured and golden, Artemis was swift and silver. Where he sought to illuminate, she protected the shadows where prey might hide. Artemis chose to remain forever maiden, devoted to the hunt and to protecting young creatures. She asked Zeus for this gift, and he granted it. The twins shared an unbreakable bond. When Apollo was mocked, Artemis defended him with arrows. When Artemis was threatened, Apollo's light blazed in warning. They were sun and moon, day and night, never truly together in the sky, but always aware of each other across the horizon. Artemis taught Apollo to track, to move silently, to respect the hunt as sacred. Apollo taught Artemis music, to find harmony in wild spaces. When Apollo prepared to face Python, Artemis offered to come with him. He refused gently. This quest was his alone to complete. She understood. She would remain on Delos to protect their mother, watching the distant mainland where her brother's light would soon be tested against ancient darkness. Let us now widen our view to see the world these gods inhabited. Greece in the age of myth was a land of wonder and terror alike. Mortals lived in the shadow of the divine, offering prayers and sacrifices, hoping to earn favor or at least avoid the gods' terrible attention. Prophecy was the thread that connected mortal and divine. Through oracles, humans could glimpse their fate, could prepare for what the gods had woven. This was why Delphi mattered so much. The oracle there was the most powerful in all the world, the voice of fate itself, now silenced by Python. Music was another bridge between realms. Through song and lyre, mortals could touch something greater. Apollo would become master of this divine art. The Greeks believed that harmony in music reflected harmony in the universe. Disorder in one meant disorder in the other. Music was mathematics made audible. Healing, too, was divine art. Disease came from the gods' displeasure, cure came from their mercy. Apollo would master both plague and remedy. The bow represented another aspect of divine power. Apollo's arrows could bring swift death or swift healing. The same weapon served both purposes. Other gods watched young Apollo with varying interest. Some saw an ally, others a rival. Olympus was never free of intrigue and competition. Athena, goddess of wisdom, approved of the young god. His domains of truth and reason aligned with her own love of enlightenment. Ares, god of war, cared little for music or prophecy. But even he respected the bow. Any god who could kill from distance earned warriors' regard. Hephaestus, the smith god, had forged Apollo's silver bow. He took pride in seeing his creation wielded by such a promising young god. Hera remained distant, her jealousy unsatisfied by Leto's suffering. She would not openly oppose Zeus's favored son, but neither would she help him. Young Hermes, another son of Zeus, watched Apollo with particular interest. The messenger god was already planning mischief involving his half-brother. But all this would come later. For now, the young god had only one enemy to consider, one trial to face. Python awaited in the darkness. The serpent had terrorized the mortal world long enough. It had tried to kill Apollo before birth. Now the debt would be repaid in full. Apollo gathered his weapons carefully. The silver bow his father had sent, a quiver of arrows that would never empty. The light within his divine blood. He bade farewell to his mother with a gentle embrace. Leto blessed him with starlight kisses on his brow, her faith in him absolute. Artemis clasped his arm in warrior's farewell. Between twins, no words were needed. They knew they would see each other again. They had to. The swan chariot descended, white wings catching the morning light. Apollo stepped aboard, and the divine birds rose toward the mainland. Across the Aegean he flew, over islands that had refused his mother, over cities where mortals pointed upward in wonder, at the golden light passing above. The mainland rose before him, green and brown and beautiful. But ahead, one mountain wore a crown of sickly clouds, Mount Parnassus, Delphi, Python's domain. Apollo descended near the mountain's base, releasing his swans to wait for his return. This battle would be fought on foot, in the serpent's own lair. The path upward was littered with warnings, bones of heroes who had come before. Weapons broken by serpent scales. Silence where birds should sing. Apollo walked past them all, his light pushing back the sickly mist that crept down the slopes. Where he stepped, grass remembered how to be green. Villagers watched from distant hiding places. They had not seen anyone approach the mountain in months. This golden stranger walked without fear. An old priest, the last who remembered when Delphi was sacred, fell to his knees. He alone recognized what walked up that mountain. A god had come. Higher and higher Apollo climbed. The mist grew thicker, more malevolent. He could feel Python's attention turning toward him, ancient and hungry. The entrance to Python's lair gaped before him, a wound in the mountainside exhaling poison. Apollo paused, fitting arrow to string. Feel this moment. Deep within, something stirred. Scales scraped against ancient stone. A hiss echoed outward, carrying the weight of centuries of death and fear. Python knew who stood at its doorstep, the child it had tried to destroy before birth, the light it had feared in prophecy. Apollo had come. The serpent's voice rumbled through the caves, felt more than heard. It spoke in the old tongue, before Olympian gods, before mortal speech. Apollo did not understand the words, but he understood their meaning. Challenge. Hunger. The absolute confidence of a creature that had never been defeated. Around them, the mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stopped. Two forces ancient and new, about to collide with destiny's weight. Apollo spoke then, his voice carrying the music of creation itself. He named himself, named his purpose, named the justice he had come to deliver. The young god's words struck Python like physical blows. No mortal had ever dared speak to it so. No god had ever bothered to try. For the first time in its endless existence, Python felt something new. Not fear exactly, but the absence of certainty. This god might be different. Apollo raised his bow, silver light running along the weapon like liquid fire. The arrow he notched blazed with concentrated sunlight, painful to behold. Python's uncertainty shattered into rage. It would not cower before a child god. With a roar that shook the mountain, the serpent struck. And so the battle began, light against shadow, new against ancient, music against chaos. The fate of Delphi would be decided in blood and fire. Python's strike came faster than thought. Apollo threw himself sideways, divine reflexes barely saving him from fangs that could crush mountains. He rolled and came up with bow drawn, loosing an arrow of pure sunlight at the serpent's exposed flank. The first shot of their war. The arrow struck true, but glanced off scales harder than any mortal armor. Python laughed, a sound like grinding boulders. First lesson learned. Apollo understood then. This would not be a battle of single strikes. He would need patience, precision, and the wisdom to find weakness. Python struck again and again, each lunge shaking the mountainside. Apollo danced between the attacks, light on his feet, never quite where fangs expected. The young god fired arrow after arrow, testing every scale, every joint, every fold of ancient flesh, searching for the one place his light could pierce. Minutes stretched into hours. Both combatants circled the mountain clearing, neither willing to give ground, neither able to land a decisive blow. Python grew frustrated. It had killed heroes in moments. This stripling god should have been dead 10 times over. Why would he not fall? Apollo felt his arms begin to ache, his divine strength tested as never before. But he remembered his mother's flight, her 9 months of suffering. If she could endure that, he could endure this. He was his mother's son as much as his father's. Light and stars combined within him. Python sensed the change and attacked with renewed fury. It reared back and sprayed a torrent of venom, enough to poison a river. Apollo raised his hands, and his light blazed forth like a shield. The venom struck and sizzled, evaporating against divine radiance before it could touch him. But maintaining such light cost him. He staggered when the venom stopped, breathing hard. Python saw weakness and lunged for the kill. Apollo dropped beneath the strike, sliding on sacred ground, and saw it. There, beneath the jaw where scales ended, soft pale flesh unarmored. The serpent's one vulnerability. Every creature, no matter how ancient, had a place where death could enter. Apollo had found Python's. Picture that moment. But Python had passed, turning now for another strike. Apollo scrambled to his feet, mind racing. He needed the serpent to rear up again. He planted his feet and began to glow. Not just light from his skin, but light from his very essence. Apollo became a small sun. Python screamed in rage at the brightness. Just as Apollo hoped, it reared up to strike with all its terrible height, exposing that soft underbelly. Apollo's bow sang. Not one arrow but 3 flew upward, streaking toward that single point of vulnerability. Each one a concentrated beam of sun. The first arrow struck and pierced. Python's eyes went wide with shock. No weapon had ever wounded it before. The sensation was entirely new. The second arrow followed the first, sinking deep. Golden light spread from the wounds like cracks in dark glass. Light entering the darkness. The third arrow buried itself to the fletching. Python's scream shook the mountain, shook all of Greece. The death cry of something truly ancient. The serpent crashed to earth, coils thrashing in agony. Venom sprayed uselessly, scales cracked and fell away, ancient flesh finally mortal after endless ages. Apollo stood over his fallen enemy, bow lowered. No triumph filled him. Only a strange sadness for something so old coming to its end. Python's yellow eyes found Apollo's golden ones. In that gaze passed something unexpected. Recognition, respect. Perhaps even something like gratitude for ending eternity. The serpent spoke one last time in its ancient tongue. Apollo still did not understand the words, but felt their meaning. Well struck, young god. Then Python closed its eyes and was still. The monster that had terrorized mortals for ages beyond counting finally slept the endless sleep. Apollo knelt beside the vast corpse and placed his hand on the cooling scales. He offered a prayer, honoring even an enemy's passing. From somewhere distant, thunder rumbled, Zeus acknowledging his son's victory. But the sky remained clear above Delphi for the first time in memory. Villagers began to emerge from their hiding places, scarcely believing what they had witnessed. The monster was dead. A god had saved them. The old priest who had recognized Apollo was first to climb the mountain path. His aged legs found strength they had not known in decades. He found Apollo sitting beside the serpent's body, young god looking exhausted but whole. The priest fell to his knees in worship. Apollo lifted the old man gently. He did not want worship. He wanted the oracle restored, wanted mortals to have their window to fate again. Together they walked to where Python had corrupted the sacred vapors. The cave mouth still breathed poison, but Apollo's light began to cleanse it. He poured his essence into the sacred space, burning away centuries of corruption. Where Python's venom had tainted, Apollo's light restored. Days passed as Apollo worked. He shaped the temple from marble he called from the earth. He tuned the sacred vapors to speak truth. Mortals came to help, carrying stones and offerings. They worked alongside a god, and their labor became sacred through his presence. The first true temple of Delphi rose from the mountainside. Columns like stone trees, pediments carved with Apollo's victory, a home for prophecy reborn. Apollo established the sacred tripod over the cleft in the earth. Here the Pythia would sit, breathing the vapors, speaking his prophecies to mortals. He chose the first oracle himself, a wise woman whose heart was pure. He touched her forehead, and she gasped as prophecy filled her. The oracle spoke, and her first words were a prophecy about Apollo himself. Even he listened with wonder, for the future holds mysteries even for gods. Word spread across Greece that Delphi was cleansed. Pilgrims began to arrive, seekers of truth, desperate for the oracle's guidance. Apollo greeted them all, mortal and hero alike. He answered what questions he could, directed others to the Pythia. Delphi became the center of the world. The navel stone, the omphalos, was placed where Python had died. It marked the center of the earth, the point where all paths converged. Apollo looked upon what he had built and felt something new. Not just victory's satisfaction, but the deeper joy of creation. He had made something lasting. He sent word to Delos through swift flying birds. Python was slain, Delphi restored. Leto wept with joy. Artemis laughed and hunted in celebration. On Olympus, the gods gathered to honor the young victor. Even Hera could not object as Zeus proclaimed Apollo's triumph before the divine assembly. Apollo was given Python's former domains as his own. Prophecy, once corrupted by the serpent, would now flow pure through the god of light. Mortals established the Pythian Games to commemorate the victory. Every 4 years, athletes and poets would compete in Apollo's honor at Delphi. Apollo competed in his own games, and none could match him. In the discus throw, in the foot race, in music most of all, the god excelled. The fame of Apollo spread until his name was spoken in every Greek city. Temples rose to him across the land, each seeking his blessing. Sailors prayed to him before voyages. Musicians dedicated their first notes to his glory. Healers invoked his name before treating the sick. Apollo found himself beloved in a way few gods achieved. Mortals did not just fear him. They genuinely loved the god who brought light and music. Yet even in triumph shadows gathered. Apollo did not know it yet, but his greatest trials lay ahead, born not from monsters but from his own heart. For now, let us rest in this moment of victory. The serpent slain, the oracle restored, a young god taking his rightful place among the great. Apollo stood at his temple as darkness fell, watching stars emerge. His mother's stars he knew now, each one placed by Leto long ago. He raised his lyre and played for the first time since the battle. The music rose into the night, a hymn of gratitude to family and fate. Far away on Delos, Leto heard the music carried on the wind. She smiled, knowing her son had become everything she dreamed he could be. Artemis heard it too, pausing in her hunt. She sent a silver arrow streaking across the sky, a shooting star to mark her twin's triumph. Apollo saw the star fall and laughed with pure joy. His family loved him. His purpose was fulfilled. What more could any god ask? The pilgrims below heard him laugh and joined in, not knowing why but feeling the rightness of the moment. Joy is contagious, even divine joy. For a time, all was well. Apollo divided his days between Delphi and Olympus, between prophecy and music, between mortal and divine concerns. He established laws for the oracle's operation. Questions must be asked in proper form. Offerings must be made. The Pythia must be treated with respect. 2 maxims were carved above his temple entrance: wisdom for all who sought the god's guidance. They still echo through history today. Know thyself. Nothing in excess. Such simple words, Yet in them lay the path to wisdom that Apollo himself was still learning to walk. For even gods must learn through experience. Wisdom cannot simply be inherited or bestowed. It must be earned through trial and error, joy and sorrow. Apollo thought his greatest trial was behind him. Python lay dead, its bones slowly turning to sacred relics. The hard part was done. How wrong he was. The serpent had tested his courage and his skill. What came next would test his heart, his mercy, his understanding. But those trials lay ahead. Tonight, at this moment in our story, Apollo rested in hard-won peace. Let us rest there with him. The night deepened over Delphi, but it was a comfortable darkness now. Not Python's corruption, but simple night, waiting for Apollo's dawn. Mortals slept in the temple precincts, dreaming of questions they would ask the oracle. Their faith had been rewarded. Hope had returned to Delphi. The Pythia sat in meditation, learning to channel the god's voice. She felt Apollo's presence like warm sunshine, even in the deepest cave. Apollo himself dozed, something gods rarely do. His dreams were golden things, memories of his mother's voice, his sister's laughter, his own music. In his dreams, he saw Python not as a monster, but as what it had been, a guardian, twisted by time, deserving pity as much as fear. Perhaps this was his first step toward wisdom, seeing enemies as more than enemies, understanding that even monsters have stories that shape them. Dawn came to Delphi, and Apollo woke with new thoughts stirring. He had killed Python. But had he understood it? What did victory truly mean? Before he could explore these thoughts, thunder rolled across the clear sky. Zeus was summoning him to Olympus. The time of reckoning had come. Apollo called his swan chariot and rose toward the mountain of the gods. Below, mortals watched their champion ascend into the clouds. He arrived at the golden gates to find them standing open but ominously quiet. No celebration waited for him here. Something was wrong. Zeus sat alone on his throne, face unreadable. The other gods watched from shadows, their expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction to genuine concern. Apollo knelt before his father, suddenly feeling very young again. The confidence of victory evaporated in the face of Zeus's terrifying silence. Zeus spoke at last. Yes, Apollo had slain Python, yes, he had cleansed Delphi. But Python's blood stained him, divine blood older than Olympus itself. Even justified killing requires purification. Apollo had ended a life older than mountains. Such an act carries weight that must be balanced. The young god's heart sank. He had done what was right, what was necessary. Was he to be punished for saving mortals from terror? Zeus's voice softened slightly. Not punishment, he said, purification. There is a difference, though the path may feel the same. Apollo must serve a mortal king for 9 years. He must set aside his divinity, his powers, his pride. He must learn humility through service. Only then would Python's blood be cleansed. Only then could he truly claim Delphi. The temple would wait. His victory would wait. This was the price. Apollo wanted to argue, to protest, to demand fairness. But looking at his father's face, he saw something unexpected. Pride mixed with sorrow. Zeus was not punishing him. Zeus was completing him. A god who had never known limitation could never understand those he ruled. This was teaching. Apollo bowed his head in acceptance. The victory over Python had been real. But victory, he was learning, was only ever the beginning of a longer journey. Apollo descended from Olympus changed. Not diminished, but humbled. His golden light remained, but his pride had been tempered by his father's wisdom. He traveled to Thessaly, to the kingdom of Admetus, a mortal king known for his kindness to strangers. Here Apollo would serve for 9 long years. Admetus did not know a god stood before him when Apollo arrived at his gates. He saw only a beautiful stranger seeking work. The king offered him work as a herdsman, tending the royal cattle. Apollo accepted without complaint. If this was his path to purification, he would walk it. And so the god of light and music became a simple coward. He lived in a humble hut, woke with the dawn, walked the hills with his charges. At first, Apollo found the work tedious. He who had slain Python now chased wandering calves. He who had built temples now mended fences. But slowly something shifted. The cattle began to thrive under his care as no herd had before. Twins were born constantly. No calf was ever lost to wolves. Apollo found himself talking to the animals, and somehow they understood. Not with words, but with the music in his voice. Even cows appreciate harmony. The other herdsmen wondered at the stranger, who could calm a stampede with a song, who knew which herbs healed sick animals before anyone else. Apollo made friends among them. Simple men who told simple stories, who laughed easily, who knew nothing of prophecy or divine courts. It was refreshing. Months passed into years. Apollo's exile became less punishment and more education. He learned how mortals lived, how they loved, how they feared. He was present when one of the herdsmen lost his wife to fever. Apollo could have healed her, but dared not reveal himself. He learned what helplessness felt like. He watched children grow, watched young love bloom and sometimes wither. Watched the endless cycle of mortal life that gods so often overlook from their heights. King Admetus noticed how his herds flourished. He promoted the mysterious stranger, gave him better quarters, treated him almost as a friend rather than servant. Apollo could have revealed himself at any time. Admetus's kindness deserved reward. But something held him back. He was learning too much to stop now. Then, in the 7th year of his exile, something happened that would change everything. Apollo's cattle began to disappear. Not to wolves, but to theft. 50 of his finest cattle vanished in a single night. Apollo searched everywhere, used every divine sense he dared, but found no trace. The thief was impossibly skilled. Days passed with no sign of the herd. Apollo's frustration turned to genuine anger. Who would dare steal from him? Even disguised, he remained a god. He followed a rumor to a mountain cave in Arcadia, where strange sounds had been heard. Singing of all things. Beautiful, innocent singing. Apollo entered the cave with bow drawn, expecting bandits or monsters. Instead, he found a cradle, and in it a baby. His half-brother Hermes, 4 days old. The infant smiled at Apollo with no trace of guilt. In his tiny hands, he held a strange instrument made from a tortoise shell. The first lyre ever created. Apollo understood instantly. This baby, barely born, had somehow stolen 50 cattle and hidden them so well that even a god could not find them. Hermes began to play his tortoise lyre, and the sound that emerged stopped Apollo's breath. It was crude, simple, but held the seed of something divine. The god of music heard music as he had never heard it before. Not the lyre of the gods, refined over ages, but something raw and new and full of possibility. Hermes stopped playing and offered the instrument to Apollo. A trade, his clever eyes seemed to say. This lyre for those cattle, a fair exchange. Apollo wanted to be angry. He should drag this infant thief to Olympus for judgment. But the lyre called to him, promised him new realms of music unexplored. He took the lyre. The moment his fingers touched the strings, he knew. This instrument would become his most treasured possession, more dear than silver bow. Hermes clapped his tiny hands in delight. He had traded invention for immunity, cattle for a brother's goodwill. Even in his cradle, he was the god of traders. Apollo left the cave not with his cattle, but with something far more valuable. The lyre would become the symbol of his musical domain forever after. A theft had become a gift. A conflict had become brotherhood. Apollo was learning that not every problem required an arrow. Some required only openness to change. Apollo brought Hermes to Olympus, not as a prisoner but as a brother. Zeus laughed when he heard the tale of the infant cattle thief. The baby was made official messenger of the gods that very day. Hermes accepted his role with the same cunning smile he had shown in his cradle. Apollo and Hermes became true brothers after that. The trickster and the light bringer, unlikely friends bound by music and mutual respect. Hermes taught Apollo to see humor in divine existence. Apollo taught Hermes that some things were sacred and worth protecting. They balanced each other. Apollo's exile continued, But now he had a visitor. Hermes would appear in Thessaly, bringing news from Olympus and mischief from everywhere else. The years of service finally ended. 9 winters had passed since Python's blood stained Apollo's hands. Zeus declared the purification complete. Apollo bid farewell to King Admetus, finally revealing his true nature. The kind king fell to his knees, overwhelmed that he had hosted a god. In gratitude for Admetus's kindness, Apollo blessed him with a gift. When death came for the king, another could take his place if they chose. Apollo returned to Delphi, to his temple, to his oracle. The Pythia wept with joy to see her god again. The pilgrims celebrated for days. Yet Apollo was not the same god who had left. Exile had changed him, deepened him. He understood mortals now in ways he never had before. His prophecies became kinder, more helpful. Where before he had spoken in riddles for amusement, now he genuinely tried to guide those who sought him. His music grew deeper too. The lyre Hermes had given him sang of things Apollo had witnessed: mortal love, mortal loss, mortal courage in the face of death. But Apollo's heart, though wiser, remained vulnerable. The god of light had not yet learned that love could wound more deeply than any serpent's fang. One day, Apollo wandered near the river Peneus, where nymphs played in the crystal waters. Among them danced Daphne, daughter of the river god himself. Daphne was beautiful, but that was not what caught Apollo's attention. She moved with wild freedom, untamed by civilization, pure as the forest itself. Apollo felt something stir in his immortal heart. Not the passing fancy he had felt for others, but something deeper, more consuming. He was truly smitten. What Apollo did not know was that Eros, god of love, had just shot him with a golden arrow. And Eros had shot Daphne with an arrow of lead. The golden arrow sparked love irresistible. The lead arrow sparked revulsion equally strong. Daphne would flee from Apollo as desperately as he pursued her. Apollo approached Daphne with his heart open, speaking words of admiration and devotion. She looked at him with horror and ran without a word. The god of light could not understand. He was beautiful, powerful, kind. Why did she flee as if from a monster? He followed, calling her name. Through forest and meadow they ran, god and nymph. His divine speed should have caught her instantly, but something held him back, perhaps his own hesitation. Daphne ran until her mortal lungs burned, until her feet bled on stones. Still she could not stop. The lead arrow's magic drove her forward. She reached her father's river and cried out for help. "Save me," she begged. "Transform me. Make me anything but what he desires." Her father heard. The river god could not stop a greater deity, but he could change what his daughter was. He granted her desperate wish. Before Apollo's horrified eyes, Daphne began to change. Her feet rooted into earth. Her arms reached skyward and became branches. Her skin hardened to bark. Her hair became leaves. Her voice became the whisper of wind through branches. Where Daphne had stood, a laurel tree now grew, beautiful and forever silent. Apollo fell to his knees before the tree, tears streaming down his golden face. He had never meant this. He had only wanted her to love him back. He placed his hand on the bark and felt her heartbeat within. Still alive in a way, but changed beyond all reaching. He had lost her by wanting her too much. In his grief, Apollo made a vow. Since she could not be his love, she would be his sacred symbol. The laurel would be honored forever. He wove the first laurel crown from her branches, gentle as a kiss. This wreath would crown victors and poets throughout all of time. The lesson cut deep. Apollo had been selfish in his love, had pursued when he should have paused, had taken when he should have asked. He returned to Delphi a sadder god but not wiser yet. That would require another loss, another wound, another love destroyed by fate's cruel hand. Time passed, as it does even for immortals. Apollo threw himself into his duties, into prophecy and music, trying to forget the laurel tree's silent heartbeat. Then came Hyacinthus, a young prince of Sparta, beautiful as dawn, who sought Apollo not as a god to worship, but as a friend to know. Apollo was cautious at first. He remembered Daphne, remembered the cost of divine love. But Hyacinthus wanted only friendship, and that felt safe. They began to spend time together. Hyacinthus taught Apollo mortal games: discus, wrestling, racing. Apollo taught him music and the secrets of the bow. For the first time, Apollo had something like an equal. Not a worshipper, not a subject, not a conquest. Just a friend who saw him as himself. Their friendship deepened into something more. Not the consuming passion Apollo had felt for Daphne, but something gentler, more sustainable. True affection. Apollo was careful this time. He did not pursue or demand. He let Hyacinthus come to him, let the mortals set the pace of their growing closeness. For one perfect summer they were happy. Playing games in the Spartan sun, swimming in cool rivers, making music beneath the stars. It seemed it could last forever. But the gods were watching. Zephyrus, the west wind, also loved Hyacinthus. Unlike Apollo, the wind god's love was jealous, possessive, growing bitter. Zephyrus saw that Hyacinthus had chosen Apollo, and the wind god's love curdled into something uglier. If he could not have the prince, perhaps no one would. One bright morning, Apollo and Hyacinthus played at discus. They took turns throwing, seeing who could hurl the bronze disc farther across the field. Apollo threw with all his divine strength. The discus soared impossibly far, gleaming in the sunlight, a perfect throw that Hyacinthus ran to retrieve. Then Zephyrus breathed. A gust of jealous wind caught the falling discus and drove it toward Hyacinthus. The bronze disc struck his head with terrible force. Apollo's scream shattered the morning peace. He ran faster than light itself, catching Hyacinthus as he fell. But even divine speed could not undo what was done. He cradled the dying prince in his arms, healing light pouring from his hands, but some wounds are beyond even a god's repair. The blow had been too true. Hyacinthus opened his eyes one last time. He smiled at Apollo, a smile without blame or fear. He had been loved by a god. That was enough. The light left those dark eyes. Hyacinthus was gone, and Apollo held only a cooling body, the shell of everything he had cherished. Apollo's grief erupted in a sound no mortal could hear, the wail of a god losing what he loved most. The sky darkened. Birds fell silent across Greece. He knelt there for hours, holding his friend, until the blood that soaked the ground began to change. Where the red pooled, something green stirred. Flowers bloomed from Hyacinthus's blood, purple and beautiful, shaped like the petals of grief itself. Apollo had made a memorial without meaning to. The god of light touched the petals and felt Hyacinthus in them somehow. His laughter, his kindness, his joy in simple games. Not gone entirely. Changed. Apollo buried his friend with full honors, planting hyacinths around the grave. Every spring, he vowed, these flowers would bloom in memory of lost joy. He sought out Zephyrus afterward, rage finally finding focus. But when he found the wind god, he saw only another being broken by jealousy's poison. Zephyrus wept and begged forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. He had acted from love corrupted, from desire turned to destruction. He was already punishing himself. Apollo raised his bow, arrow notched and glowing. One shot would end the wind god, would avenge Hyacinthus forever. His hand trembled on the string. But Hyacinthus had smiled at the end. No blame, no call for vengeance. Only love, only acceptance. What would his friend want Apollo to do now? Slowly Apollo lowered his bow. Killing Zephyrus would not bring Hyacinthus back. It would only add more death to death, more grief to grief. Nothing would be healed. He turned and walked away, leaving the wind god to his guilt. Some punishments are worse than death. Living with what you have done can be eternal torment. Apollo wandered Greece for many days, his light dimmed to gray. He visited every place he and Hyacinthus had been happy, saying goodbye to memories. At the river where they had swum, he let his tears fall into the water. At the hills where they had raced, he walked slowly, remembering faster times. He played his lyre at each place, composing songs of their friendship. These hymns would become some of the most beautiful music ever heard by mortal ears. His grief did not fade, but it transformed. The sharp agony became a gentle ache, a space in his heart that Hyacinthus would always occupy. He understood something new now. Love always risks loss. To love anything is to be vulnerable. But the alternative, to love nothing, is no life at all, even for a god. Apollo returned to Olympus changed once more. The young god who had slain Python was gone. In his place stood someone tempered by joy and sorrow alike. Zeus watched his son approach and saw what the years had made. Not just a god of light, but a god who understood shadow. Not just a healer, but one who had borne wounds. Leto embraced her son, feeling the weight of experience he now carried. Her starlight mingled with his golden glow. Mother and child reunited across distance of years and pain. Artemis found her twin on a temple balcony that night, gazing at the stars their mother had placed. She sat beside him in silver silence. No words passed between them, none were needed. She knew his losses, felt them through their twin bond. She simply sat with him until dawn. When morning came, Apollo rose with the sun as he always did. But now his light carried warmth it had not held before. Understanding had softened his radiance. He returned to Delphi to find the muses waiting. They had felt his grief across the distance, and had come to offer what comfort poetry and song could provide. Apollo led them in music that day, and the songs they created spoke of love and loss in ways that touched every mortal heart that heard them. The hymns spread across Greece and beyond. Sailors sang them on dark waters. Mothers sang them to crying children. Lovers sang them to each other. Through music, Apollo shared his hard-won wisdom. Through melody, he taught mortals that grief was not weakness, but proof of having truly lived and loved. Years passed into decades, decades into centuries. Apollo remained at the center of Greek civilization, his oracle guiding, his music inspiring, his light never failing. He took no more mortal lovers after Hyacinthus. Not from fear of loss, but from understanding that some connections transcend the need for repetition. Every spring, when hyacinths bloomed across Greece, Apollo would visit the flowers and remember. Not with crippling grief, but with gratitude for what had been. Every victory in the Pythian Games was crowned with laurel, and Apollo would think of Daphne. Not with guilt, but with respect for her choice and her sacrifice. Through loss, he had learned to honor what remains. Through grief, he had learned to celebrate what was. This was the wisdom the God of truth had found. He had become what Delphi's maxims commanded. He knew himself, his capacity for love and harm alike. He practiced nothing in excess, even grief, even joy. The God who had once chased Daphne, without thought now waited for those who sought him. The God who had wept helplessly over Hyacinthus now transformed grief into beauty. This was Apollo's final transformation. Not the slaying of Python, great as that was. Not the founding of Delphi, important as that remained. But this, becoming wise through suffering. Light means nothing without shadow to define it. Music means nothing without silence to contrast it. Joy means nothing without sorrow to deepen it. Apollo had learned to hold all these opposites within himself. He was healer and plague, bringer, truth, teller and mystery keeper, gentle musician and deadly archer. He was, at last, worthy of all the domains his father had given him. Not because he was perfect, but because he had learned from imperfection. Artemis, watching her twin, saw the journey complete. The brother who had been born in brilliant light had walked through shadow and emerged all the brighter. And so the god of light took his place among the great Olympians, not as the youngest proving himself, but as one who had earned his seat through trial and tragedy. His light would shine for ages yet to come, touching every corner of the world that Greece would influence. But that is a story for another night. Tonight, we rest here with a god who learned that wisdom comes not from victory alone, but from loss, from love, from the courage to remain open to both. Now let us rest in the meaning of what we have witnessed. Apollo's story is more than entertainment. It shaped how ancient Greeks understood their world. To the ancient Greeks, Apollo represented civilization itself. He was the force that transformed chaos into order, wilderness into cities, noise into music. When they built temples, they followed proportions Apollo's priests declared sacred. The mathematical harmony in Greek architecture reflects his domain of cosmic order. Python represented everything civilization feared. The ancient, the chaotic. The hungry darkness that existed before humans learned to build walls and light fires. Apollo's victory over the serpent was not just a battle tale. It was how Greeks explained why the world now had order, why light followed darkness each dawn. The oracle at Delphi held real power in Greek society. Cities sent envoys to consult the Pythia before declaring wars, founding colonies, or making major decisions. When the Pythia spoke, Greeks believed Apollo spoke through her. Her prophecies changed the course of history, guiding the fates of kings and common folk alike. Know thyself. This command carved above Apollo's temple became a cornerstone of Western philosophy. Socrates himself said the examined life was the only life worth living. Nothing in excess. The second maxim warned against hubris, the pride that brings mortals and gods alike to ruin. Apollo's own stories taught this lesson painfully. Apollo himself learned these truths through error. He pursued Daphne to excess. He loved without restraint. His own myths demonstrated the costs of ignoring wisdom. The Greeks understood that even gods were not perfect. Apollo's flaws made him relatable, his growth made him inspiring. Perfection teaches nothing. Struggle teaches everything. Daphne's transformation speaks to something deep in human experience. Sometimes what we desire most destroys itself in our grasp. Some loves are not meant to be held. The laurel crown became a symbol of victory precisely because it remembered loss. Every triumph carries within it the shadow of what was sacrificed to achieve it. Hyacinthus's death teaches that love makes us vulnerable, but that vulnerability is what makes love precious. The safest hearts are the emptiest. Apollo's choice to spare Zephyrus shows that mercy requires more strength than vengeance. Any god can destroy. Only a wise god can refrain. Greeks saw healing and plague as two sides of one power. Apollo could cure disease or send it. This reflected their understanding that medicine and poison often share a source. The bow represented this duality perfectly. The same weapon that brought swift death could bring mercy through quick endings to suffering. Power itself is neutral. Music was divine to the Greeks because it created harmony from separate notes. Just as society creates harmony from separate people, Apollo's lyre was a tool of civilization. The sun's daily journey across the sky was sometimes credited to Apollo's chariot. Each dawn was a reminder that light returns, that darkness never wins forever. This myth gave Greeks courage during their darkest times. When Persia invaded, when plagues struck, when wars raged, they remembered that light always returns after night. Apollo's twin bond with Artemis represented the balance Greeks sought in all things. Sun and moon, day and night. Civilization and wilderness, each needed the other. Neither twin was complete alone. Apollo without Artemis would be all civilization, no wilderness. Artemis without Apollo would be all wilderness. No civilization. Balance was the key. The story of Apollo's exile taught that even justified actions have consequences. Killing Python was right, but divine blood still required purification. Justice has many layers. By serving a mortal king, Apollo learned humility. The Greeks valued this. Even their mightiest heroes began as servants or exiles before rising to glory. What universal truths does Apollo's story hold, beyond its ancient context? The same truths that make all great myths timeless across cultures and ages. We all face monsters, fears, obstacles, shadows in our path. Like Apollo, we must find their weakness. Not through brute force alone, but through patient observation. We all pursue things that flee from us. Like Apollo, we must learn when to let go, when to honor what we love by releasing it. We all lose what we love. Like Apollo, we must find ways to transform grief into beauty, to create memorials that honor rather than mourn. We all must choose between vengeance and mercy. Like Apollo, we discover that mercy often requires more courage than revenge and heals more wounds. Apollo's journey is our journey. From youthful pride through painful lessons to hard-won wisdom. This is why his story still resonates, thousands of years after it was first told. Apollo's influence did not end with ancient Greece. His story traveled through Rome, through the Renaissance, through the ages to reach us here tonight. The Romans adopted him almost unchanged, one of the few Greek gods they kept with his original name. Apollo Phoebus, they called him. Apollo the Bright One. Emperor Augustus made Apollo his patron deity. The Palatine Temple in Rome rivaled Delphi itself in splendor. Power still sought Apollo's blessing. When Rome fell, Apollo's stories survived in manuscripts copied by monks who saw pagan tales as echoes of deeper truths. Even Christianity could not erase him entirely. The Renaissance rediscovered Apollo with passion. Artists competed to capture his perfect form, his divine beauty, his embodiment of human potential perfected. Michelangelo, Raphael, Bernini, the greatest artists of that age, all tried their hands at Apollo. His image became synonymous with artistic excellence itself. Bernini's Apollo and Daphne captured the transformation in marble so perfectly that viewers swear they can see the bark creeping up her legs even now. Poots too found endless inspiration. Ovid, Keats, Shelley, Rilke, each generation reinvented Apollo's tales for their own age, finding new meaning in ancient stories. The Delphic maxims became foundations of Western thought. Philosophy, psychology, ethics, all trace threads back to those words carved above Apollo's temple door. When humanity reached for the stars, we named our moon program Apollo. The god of light would carry us to that silver sphere his sister once ruled. Apollo 11 landed humans on the moon in 1969. Somewhere, the mythic Apollo must have smiled to see mortals walking in Artemis's domain. Today, Apollo appears in films, books, video games, and countless other media. Percy Jackson introduced him to new generations. His story refuses to fade. Musicians still invoke him, whether they know it or not. Every orchestra, every concert hall, every moment when music creates order from chaos. That is Apollo's legacy. Hospitals bear serpent symbols descended from his healing arts. The caduceus and the rod of Asclepius, Apollo's physician's son, still mark places of healing. Sports still crown victors with laurel wreaths at some ceremonies. Every gold medal echoes Daphne's transformation, victory intertwined with ancient sorrow. Poetry prizes, music awards, artistic achievements, so many bear Apollo's name or his symbols. We still associate him with excellence in creative endeavor. 3,000 years after Greeks first told his stories, Apollo endures. Not because he was perfect, but because his journey toward wisdom mirrors our own. As long as humans seek light in darkness, order in chaos, beauty in sorrow, Apollo's story will continue to be told. Perhaps forever, perhaps even now. And so we come to the end of our journey together. We have walked with Apollo from his desperate birth on floating Delos to the heights of Olympus. We watched him slay the ancient serpent Python, claiming Delphi for light and truth. We saw him build his temple, establish his oracle, become what he was meant to be. We walked beside him through 9 years of humble service, learning as he learned that wisdom comes not from power, but from understanding those we serve. We felt his heart break twice, once for Daphne who fled his love, once for Hyacinthus who death stole away. We saw grief become creation, loss become beauty. Through all of it, Apollo grew. From proud young god to tempered wisdom, from slayer of monsters to healer of hearts. His journey mirrors the best of our own. The ancient Greeks who first told this tale are long gone, their voices silent, their temples crumbled. But through stories like this, something of them remains. Every time we tell Apollo's story, we honor those unknown poets who first shaped it. We keep faith with ancestors we never knew, but who gave us this gift. They believed that stories held power, that the right tale told at the right time could heal, could teach, could transform. Perhaps they were right. Tonight, we have been part of that ancient tradition. Storyteller and listener, connected by words older than most nations, sharing in something timeless. Now Apollo's light grows gentle, his lyre plays its softest melody. The god of day welcomes the peaceful night, knowing dawn will come again. Let his golden warmth wrap around you like a blanket. Let his music carry you toward dreams. You have earned this rest, just as he earned his wisdom. Sleep well, friend. May Apollo's light find you gentle, and may your dreams be filled with ancient wonders. Until next time, rest in peace and beauty.